What's up, guys? This is Chris from Outlaw here, and today we've got a spicy video for you. Today we're going to be talking about micro 9mm, specifically the small double stack micro 9mm, but this video will definitely apply to the single stack as well, and even some of the very small 380 and 32 ACP and stuff like that. So basically kind of encompassing all of these small popular concealed carry pistols, and we're going to be talking about some reasons why you actually don't want one. There's a lot of guns on the market, and there's an awful lot of guns made specifically for carry, but they're made in a lot of different sizes. Some of those sizes are going to be full-size pistols, and we're going to be talking about some guns that I have carried or certainly recommended carrying in the past. This is my Glock 34. This is a full-size competition slash home defense slash definitely carry gun if you so choose. Very lightweight but still rather large, so we're going to be kind of comparing the size to something that you might be more interested in carrying, like this M&P Shield Plus here, and you can kind of see how much smaller it really is. And if you go with a really small gun like maybe the G4X or something like that, they're chambered in the same round and actually have a relatively similar capacity at about 12 here and factory about 17 here, but you can obviously put a lot more. And considering they shoot the exact same round, it's actually pretty surprising how small you can go for carry guns. So the full size is obviously an option. The compact here, this is a CZP-07, and if you compare that to something like the Ruger Max 9 here, still significantly larger with the 4-inch barrel and 15-round magazine capacity. So we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of the micro 9s, but specifically the cons, I just wanted to talk about some of the pros first. Is they're a lot smaller than your average even subcompact right here with this Taurus G3C or G2C, sorry, and you can see the same amount of rounds significantly smaller, and that's really the allure of the micro 9. It's not that they do anything particularly well other than size or weight. Some of them are as reliable and accurate as some full-size guns like maybe the P07, but they're going to have a lot of downsides, and that's what we're going to talk about here. And the reason why we're going to talk about them is because they are recommended to new shooters a lot. And if you're a new shooter, or if you're a person unfamiliar with firearms, handguns, stuff like that, and you're unaware of how difficult it is to actually shoot them, you could definitely fall into this trap, and maybe one of these micro 9s could be your very first pistol. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't buy them. I'm just saying you should know in advance what you're getting into. Now, I wanted to thank my Patreon supporters for this video. Thank you guys very much. It's because of you the channel is possible. I purchased almost every gun that's on the table with Patreon dollars. If you want to help out, all you got to do is click the link in the description and sign up. Also in that description is a link to a local homeless shelter in Ames, Iowa. It's the YSS. I'd really appreciate it if you guys would go down, click that link, and donate to those kids. And the first thing you're going to get into is recoil. That's going to be the first reason why you might not want a micro 9mm. If the first handgun you ever shot was the Taurus GX4, you might not have a lot of fun shooting, particularly because it takes a lot of grip, it takes a lot of technique, and it takes a lot of years behind a pistol in order to shoot this fast and accurately and easy. So the reason for that is because handguns are very difficult to shoot to begin with, and then you add in the fact that this is very small, hard to get a hold of, which increases the recoil. It's a lightweight, which also increases the recoil, and overall it makes it a very snappy and a less fun shooting experience. People say, just toughen up, but if it's not fun, you're not going to train with it and you're not going to be very good with it, which we'll get into later. But recoil is going to be substantially more on this than something like this, and I think that's obvious to most people, just being is that you don't have enough real estate to get a hold of the gun, and obviously physics being as they are, heavier guns recoil less because, you know, they're helping you out a little bit. But recoil is going to be a big factor when it comes to micro 9s, and that's something you should be aware of. Recoil on something like this, Ruger Max 9, for example, is going to be as much or more than something like a 45 ACP in a 1911. So that's one thing you're going to have to be aware of. It's a trade-off. It's a trade-off between size and weight versus recoil and pulse and 4 other things, which we'll talk about here. Now, before we get done with recoil, I want to mention that not all micro 9s are created equal, and this has the most recoil out of all the micro 9s that I have shot, and this has the least, and this is the M&P 9 Shield Plus. The SIG P365 XL also has significantly less recoil than the Ruger, so if you're recoil shy and still want one of these, maybe check out the Shield or the XL. Now, we'll get into the overall overall real estate on the pistol here, and we'll talk about kind of ease of use, because that's the other thing that you're gonna have a difficult time with. Especially if you have bigger hands like me, you're gonna have a harder time trying to manipulate the trigger. You're gonna have a harder time trying to manipulate the controls, especially. So in reloading a gun here, we'll use one that has a mag. This is the Springfield Hellcat here. As you can see, my hand overhangs across the back of the magazine here, even with the extended magazine. So what happens when I reload, you see all that meat that gets stuck? If I have a good solid firing grip and you're tensed up because you just had to use your pistol for whatever reason, and you reload and you take a whole big chunk of your hand with you right there. So that's one thing that you have to be aware of with these really small pistols, is that you have to develop a new technique where you loosen up your grip completely, reload, and reclose your grip. Or just accept the fact that you're gonna pinch the shit out of yourself.
Okay.
Just gotta get used to it a little bit. Throw the mag behind my back instead of putting it in my pocket, I guess. Now, even stuff like the magazine release and slide release are going to be difficult to use, just simply because they are scaled down to the size of the pistol. So the magazine release is going to be very difficult to reach, usually not in a very good position. You got to kind of cock back like this, or twist the pistol and press the magazine out, which sucks. And if you're going to be running the slide lock slide release, a lot of times you got to fandangle a little bit and then hit it with the back of my thumb. They're just certainly not as easy to use as something obviously like a Glock 34 or even a compact size P07. So that's something to be aware of. If the compacts are nice because they're kind of splitting the difference between something like this and then something like this. Now, these cons aren't just for big old ogres like me. These cons are also for smaller statured people. My wife is only 5'2", you've seen her on the channel plenty of times. She has very tiny hands, and she also has a harder time operating these guns, these Micro 9s, than something like this Glock 34. And if you don't believe me, you can check any of our First Shots videos where she shoots those Micro 9s, and you can see those shortcomings in high def. The other thing I want to talk about when it comes to manipulating the gun, number 3, is going to be they are less accurate, and that's for 2 reasons. The first reason is going to be the sight radius. So if you're running iron sights, this applies. If you're running a red dot, not so much, but it still kind of does, which we'll get into here in a second. So the sight radius on a smaller slide is just harder to shoot with because it's shorter and you have less room for air than something like this, which has a much longer sight radius, that's funny. But you say you can put an optic on these. Well, you can, but most of the time for optics mounting systems like what's on the Ruger here, you can usually only put micro optics on, like the RMRCC or the 507, and those are going to have a much smaller window. So you gain the accuracy that you get with a red dot, but it's going to be significantly slower than something with a large window like this SRO, and it's going to be a little less repeatable overall. I have thousands and thousands of reps on a handgun, and I still sometimes have a hard time acquiring a sight picture on those micro red dots like the Shield RMS or the Trijicon RMRCC. So even if you put a red dot on them, they're still either you're gonna lose some accuracy or you're gonna lose speed any way you look at it. But the biggest way that you lose accuracy with something like this or something like this is generally gonna be the trigger manipulation. So trigger manipulation is the difference between hitting or missing your target, no doubt about it. Everybody always talks about sight picture, but the reality of marksmanship is trigger manipulation, trigger control, controlling that trigger to the rear of the gun without moving your sights in any way. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Pat your finger, crook your finger. You can use your thumb or your big toe if you really want to. You just have to pull the trigger straight to the rear without moving the sights. And that's harder to do on a Micro 9. Why? Because generally the grip is smaller, so your finger's in there more than you would like. If you can see my trigger reach on this M&P Shield here, my trigger finger's all the way in my comfortable spot, but you come back to the P07 and it kind of sits nicely in the crook right there because I have a little bit more gap between the trigger and the web of my hand. But more so is generally that you have less real estate to help control that trigger as well. So not only do you usually have heavier triggers in smaller guns, but you also have less space between your trigger finger and the web of your hand, but also you have less space to control your trigger finger with your support hand, which most people think you can't do, but you absolutely can. People that generally shoot right-handed, shoot low and left, well, you can fix that with a solid grip. That's another way that you can kind of help that out, especially when you're starting to go real fast and you're slapping the shit out of that trigger. A good way to keep that gun on target, have a solid support hand, whether it be driving with your thumb, whether it just be using your palm of your hand like this, whether you're gonna Jerry Mitchell-like it, doesn't really matter, but you don't have the space to do so. So you don't have space to control recoil, but you also don't have space to help you manipulate the trigger. Now, number 4, we already kind of glossed over, but it is going to be you won't practice with it. And because of the previous 3 things that we talked about, you're gonna have a harder time getting accuracy. It's gonna be more frustrating. It's gonna be more recoil, so you're gonna be able to shoot less rounds before your wrist or your finger or something hurts, especially if you're over 40. And all the other things combined, it's gonna make it a little less fun to train with. So unless you're very serious about your carry gun, it's likely that you're gonna be shooting this a lot. And I'm guilty of this as well as any other person that I know. I shoot this more than I shoot, well, this, which is one of my current carry guns. So it's not that I don't shoot this at all, but I certainly am better with the 34 because I train more with it because it's more fun to shoot than this is. Now everything is a size and weight trade-off, and I understand that you guys aren't going to be carrying an Atlas Artemis or something like that, but just remember that that is one of the cons of this gun, that you're going to inevitably end up carrying a gun that you're probably going to shoot a little bit less than you would normally. And a way to offset that is get a larger gun that is very similar in size, or get a larger gun that is very similar in makeup and controls as this. So if you're going to carry a shield, maybe get an M&P compact or an M&P full size and shoot those, and that way you won't be missing too much when you go back to your Shield Plus. And I'm not saying that's an excuse not to shoot this at all. You certainly have to shoot it and get used to its own unique trigger pull, recoil, and pulse and all that. But it is a way to kind of cheat the system a little bit and have a little bit more fun while still carrying one of these. Yep. Now, the first 4 were kind of obvious, and if you're a gun guy, you probably already know those things. But the 5th one is going to be something that I don't hear talked about a lot, that I actually think is as important, if not maybe a little more important than all the other ones I talked about. And that is acquiring a firing grip from the holster. Your ability to get the gun out of the holster is as important as your ability to shoot the gun, because likely you're going to be ambushed. You might already be in a fight that you didn't know was going to happen. You might have just gotten thrown on the ground. Now you're doing some jiu-jitsu, or you're doing some wrestling maneuvers. You're getting an underhook, something like that. And now you're going to have to draw your gun with one hand, or you're carrying a child, or you're doing any number of tasks where you might have to draw one-handed or maybe with your left hand. Those things do happen. They do happen. Check out active self-protection. And the likelihood of you being able to successfully do that is less likely with something like this than it is with something like this. So the ability to get the gun out, get it into the fight, is probably the most important factor when carrying a gun. Statistically, at least. I mean, obviously you still want to be good with it, you still want to be accurate with it, not an excuse not to do those things, but getting the gun out is extremely important, and you can get this gun out better than you can get this gun out. That just is what it is. Now, you can get better with practice. You certainly can. And if you have smaller hands, that does help. If you're using an extended magazine, that certainly helps me. When I do draw practice with the Shield, the M&P Shield, I always use the extended mag because honestly, that's what I carry it with, because I have a hard time operating the gun without it. That being said, that's one thing you're gonna have to be aware of. If you carry it in a purse, or you carry it in a fanny pack, or you carry it in an ankle holster, something even more to get the gun, you might want to reconsider this particular style of gun, because hey, if you can't get the damn thing out, doesn't much matter what it is. Now, in closing, I'm not trying to hit on the Micro 9s, and I'm not trying to tell you guys not to buy them. I think they're great. I've carried the 365, I've carried the M&P Shield Plus, and I'll probably carry the Glock version when it comes out in like 2028. But the reality is they have a lot of shortcomings compared to a compact or a full size or even a subcompact gun like the Glock 26 shoots significantly better to me personally than something like this, and you're not actually gaining that much weight. So people always go straight to this because it's super easy to carry, but those people generally don't shoot a lot. And I happen to shoot a lot. I'm lucky enough to be able to do so. And I can tell you that in shooting, in practice, subcompacts generally shoot better, at least for me, than these do, and they generally shoot better for my wife, who is also a lot smaller than I am. So I'm not saying don't get them, I'm just simply saying that in the actual use of the firearm, you're going to be sacrificing some accuracy, some recoil control, and some overall functionality of the controls and the ability to draw it. So overall, I just wanted to say some of these tips. If you have any more, let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please help out your local homeless shelters, and remember to recycle. I'll check you later.